Hamas is being given 3 to 4 days to respond to Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan. Joining us now to discuss this and the rest of politics, it's ACT Party leader David Seymour and Green MP Ricardo Menéndez March. Good morning.
Morning, Anna.
Good to see you both. Why don't we start with energy, because that's coming out in, 40 minutes' time. Ricardo, you guys are wanting to nationalise the gentailers, right? The rest of them, buy back the rest?
Well, what we're hoping to see in the announcement is strong intervention in the electricity sector. Yep, that could be one of the things that the government could be doing, as well as increasing competition. The reality is we've got gentailers making massive profits at the moment, while thousands of Kiwis are struggling to make ends meet and pay their electricity bills.
We just heard from the EMA that we'll have Kiwi businesses going to Australia and taking the jobs with them unless we get some quick fixes. So, you know, you guys obviously don't like gas, assuming you won't like LNG. Are you okay with LNG?
But, you know, speaking of quick fixes, gas and oil exploration in and of itself can take years before it comes into production, right? So we do need the government to show us a timeline of when bills will be lowered for businesses and households. What I don't want to see is more families queuing up at work and income to get advances to pay for their electricity bills. That is unacceptable. So we need a minister that actually tells us at what point Kiwis will be seeing the electricity price lowering.
Does this stuff that's been announced today, Minister, is it anything that's going to have an immediate impact? Are we going to avoid next year's crunch?
Yeah, I think you will see some changes in what Simon Watts has to say that are going to bring relief in the short term. But I also just make the point that this is a problem that has built up over a decade. You know, we've had the fall off in gas production. We won't have the argument again about why that is, but people can make up their own mind. We've had a real big restriction on building any kind of new thermal generation, especially coal. And once you start crossing off the different ways that people around the world generate energy, there's not a lot left, or at least not enough, to get energy around the clock 365 days a year, which is what consumers actually want. So what you will see is a balance of stability so that people can see the continuity, they can see it's safe to invest in New Zealand, so we can bring new energy on stream, and some more immediate relief. That's the balance the government has had to strike. Also, just make one point, if I can, about this letter between Chris Luxon and Chris Hipkins, and especially the way it's been reported. There's been all this who sent the letter, and was it sent to the Herald before it was sent to the politician, and did they read it, and was it a stunt? Who cares? The only thing I care about is, will the Labour Party commit to supporting people who look for gas now so that we can have energy into the future? If the Labour Party can't answer basic questions like that,
well,
none of us have any certainty.
The answer is no. They're not going to allow oil and gas exploration at all.
Well, if that is their position,
they said that yesterday,
then we have a serious problem, because people are not going to invest if there's no continuity. People are tired of politics going flip-flop, flip-flop.
Because you wouldn't let them, would you? You wouldn't go into bed with a party that was going to re-export oil and gas?
No, because for two key reasons. Not only is it contrary to meeting our climate goals, but there's a reason why gas and oil in and of itself are becoming less economic investments.
Yeah, I know. But Ricardo, the thing is, we're talking about jobs. Like, these are workers who will be out of work because of this whole climate thing, and we're 0.1% of global emissions. I mean, if
we
others
could
are going to keep doing it,
could be creating thousands of jobs if we invested in the right type of energy. For example, what we have shown in our Green Industrial Strategy, as well as in previous elections policies, is that we could be creating thousands of jobs by solarizing far more of our public sector infrastructure. And that is important because it creates resiliency, it creates jobs, and it actually invests in things that are actually far more economic.
How many people does it take to man a solar farm?
Well, it's not just the manning, it's the installation, and so if we invest in construction in ways that are far more energy efficient.
How long does it take to install a solar farm?
It's not just the installation of a solar farm, and it is far less than, for example, it takes for gas and oil to go from exploration to production.
All right, let's move on. Trump and the peace plan for Gaza. He and Netanyahu have got this agreement. Winston Peters has come out and said that we support it. You know, we would get behind something like that. Realistically, though, do you think it'll happen?
Well, the situation's so awful, you've just got to hope. Hope that Hamas will actually recognise the position they're in. They have instigated the problem and they need to back down. hope that Israel will see that this is the best hope to have a peace in their region, and between the two, get towards that hope of a two-state solution, which has always been our position, even though we can't recognise it right now.
Ricardo, with the Greens, what's your position on Hamas? Like, do you think they should have or could have any role in, as an authority over any parts of Palestine?
And that is kind of the problem, is that I think at all these points through the peace negotiations, there's been a conflation between Palestinian civilians and this specific group that you're mentioning. What we need to see is a peace plan that genuinely grants Palestinians sovereignty over their land, and that stops actually this what about Hamas, what about Islam, that is actually simply enabling more losses of life on the ground of Palestinians who simply want to see peace and who didn't deserve to die, actually.
I agree with you. It has to be Palestinians who, and not Hamas. So
but that is not what the Trump peace plan is actually achieving, right? You're bringing in people like Tony Blair, who's self-declaring himself as future governor of Gaza, and that is not sovereignty for Palestinians. That is just another form of settler colonialism.
Yeah, but you do need to form a government in Palestine that is not Hamas. Now, we tried this in 2004. Hamas took over. So how do you fill the vacuum with someone who's not Hamas? That's what the world's trying to work out.
Exactly. And do you guys agree that Hamas should have no role in a government?
Palestinian people should be empowered to actually make these decisions in a way that grants them self-determination, to be able to hold elections, for example. This is not what Israel is working towards. They have made it really clear that they don't back a two-state solution, and what we need to do as a nation is stop enabling Israel's genocide and actually take a peace plan seriously, not this clown fest of bringing people like Tony Blair to run Gaza.
Hey, what about the superannuation age here? We had that Treasury report last week. We know things are going to get tight, so we're going to have to do something on super. We'll start with you, David. What age of entitlement is ACT sort of proposing or looking at? Or what's your...
Well, we published an alternative budget saying that it should rise. I think that probably stopped some people supporting ACT, quite frankly. But the point is that it will rise. I mean, you look at the numbers. We now have a 20th century welfare state where people have 4 kids and don't live that long, for a 21st century population where people have 2 kids and live into their 80s.
Yeah.
The numbers don't stack up. So it's going to change one of 2 ways. Either we start doing it ourselves in an intelligent and mature way, gradually, so people can adjust to the change, and we can talk about how KiwiSaver is an assist on the side and have a really mature conversation.
And 67?
Well, that might be a number, but let's have the discussion. And then the second thing is you got to look at, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is we're sometime in the 2030s, there's a big earthquake, there's a big recession, and the people that loan money to the New Zealand Treasury will say, no, we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to keep funding your debt because you don't have a plan.
Yeah, totally.
And then the change will happen and people won't like it.
And the other thing is, if you want to increase the super age and address this problem, you need a national government without New Zealand first, because he's never going to do it, right?
Well, all I'd say is that everybody owns this problem as a New Zealander.
Yeah, but Winston doesn't want a bar of it.
Well, yeah, but look, I mean, there's lots of things where they took a position when they were in government with Labor. They're now voting the other way with us now. Look at oil and gas. I mean, they voted to ban it. Now they voted to unban it. So
yeah, look, we don't support increasing the superannuation age for 2 key reasons. One of them is what David Seymour has talked about on economic resiliency. That comes from a lack of investment in public infrastructure. When we are hit by natural disaster, it's not superannuation that has caused our lack of economic resiliency. It's our lack of investment in things like rail, adequate housing, etc. That is what those lending agencies are looking for when they're assessing how much money they're able to lend us. With superannuation, if the problem is having a few wealthy superannuants who are just basically creaming it, we got to tax them in a fair way. That means that they just can't hold multiple properties, claim the superannuation, and just live this amazing cozy life. Because at the end of the day, what we do have is senior citizens over the age of 65 that are experiencing increased hardship, lining up at work and income for hardship grants.
So you wouldn't. So age of entitlement wouldn't change.
No.
But and you wouldn't even means test super either. You just tax rich people more.
Because if you've got superannuants who are basically full of wealth and they're also claiming superannuation, one of the best ways we can address it is by a fair tax system, not by punishing superannuants who in many cases will be living in hardship.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it there, guys. Good to see you both.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for coming in. There's David Seymour from ACT and Ricardo Menéndez March from the Greens.